Another race weekend, another disappointment for Mercedes. The excitement of Lewis Hamilton's shock second place in the sprint race was quickly deflated, as he could only manage 18th in qualifying later that day. Mercedes are in freefall. The fun is over. The honeymoon is coming to an end, and at some point, the team's supposed no-blame culture has to give way to people taking responsibility for what has gone wrong. Toto Wolff is under pressure to get his team together, and trying to leverage Max Verstappen out of Red Bull is not a good enough solution. Wolff's head is being called for. Is it time for F1's least experienced team principal to admit that he might not be up to the job of turning the Mercedes team around? Today, I'll check out the discourse that is brewing at Mercedes and the growing sentiment that Wolff might not be up to the job. So, don't go anywhere. Formula One has both a short and long-term memory. We remember the greats like Schumacher and Senna long after they're gone. We remember that Ferrari, Williams and McLaren were once title-winning teams. Yet at the same time, a driver's only as good as their last race, and when a new season begins, the pain or joy of the previous one is quickly forgotten, as optimism or fear set in for what the new year might bring. Mercedes are suffering from both sides of that at the moment. We remember Mercedes and Hamilton dominating the sport for 8 years, but they're only as good as their last race, which for the last 2 years has not been very good. It was just over a year ago now that Toto Wolff penned an open letter to the Mercedes fanbase, apologising for the team's poor performance after the 2023 season opener at the Bahrain Grand Prix. They finished 5th and 7th at that race, an identical result to the one they would secure a year later. Perhaps the lack of a letter this year is a sign of acceptance of their current position, or perhaps the fact that it was a massive stab in the back to the factory team and received a huge amount of backlash meant Toto just put it in his diary this year. Who knows? In that letter they said, "Inside the team we talk about having the courage to fail, the character to be accountable, and the strength to see failure as an opportunity. We have been open and searingly honest about where we find ourselves. And we're working urgently and calmly to build our recovery plan, focusing on what needs to happen short-term, medium-term, and long-term to win." The truth is that despite the change in their fortunes, Mercedes weren't failing back then and they aren't failing now, not in the grand scheme of things. This is life in Formula One. This is the natural flow of the sport. Through the 90s, Williams were the sport's dominant force. The noughties belonged to Ferrari, the early 20s were Red Bulls, but they all fell away. The second half of the 2010s were Mercedes, and now they too have fallen away. For the seasoned hands throughout Formula One, they know that this is how the sport works. Do you think Adrian Newey was writing apology letters to Christian Horner in 2014 for not ensuring that Red Bull continued winning after the regulation changes? Can you really imagine Frank Williams on the evening news in the late 90s asking for forgiveness from fans? Of course not. This is just what happens in all sports. This is something that Toto Wolff has never really experienced. Sure, he might have seen it on the TV, but his time actually embedded within a team, in touch with the day-to-day of Formula One, has all been spent expecting to win every race. That was until the regulation changes for 2022 though. Back to China, and the realisation that Formula One isn't as easy as it might have first seemed appears to have really hit home for Wolff. Over the past couple of years, he's made some big promises about performance gains, promises that fans of the Silver Arrows stopped listening to last season. With the team bringing a massive upgrade package to Miami featuring a new floor and side pods, Toto has opened up about the bright spots that he says his team has been living off for the last 2 seasons. We can keep telling ourselves that there were bright spots at the weekend, but we have to take a step. We'll bring a bit of something to Miami, where hopefully we can expect something. But today, you're just behind the Ferraris and behind Norris, just not good enough. While Mercedes has failed to finish on the podium in a Grand Prix so far this season, Wolff does not think this year's car is worse than its previous ground effect machinery. Instead, he thinks his squad was perhaps flattered before when rivals like McLaren and Ferrari were having their own competitive struggles. The advantage we had was McLaren was not racing us for the first half of the season, so they weren't a competitor, he said. Ferrari wasn't as quick and dropped the ball on several occasions, and that's why we were a podium contender and closest to Red Bull. Now, those teams have picked up their performance levels. This is a relative game, and suddenly, what was good enough for third last year is now only good enough for sixth. At the end of the day, a lack of progress is the problem of the team principle. Sure, individual team members can make mistakes. Mike Elliott was an advocate for sticking with the zero pods and the concept that came with them in 2023, and it cost him his job. But it is Toto's job to make progress happen in a broader sense, and he can't just rely on an existing skilled team to make things happen for him. Toto recently signed a contract to extend his stay as team principal, but as a one-third owner of the team, that's pretty meaningless. If he was in the same position as Mattia Binotto was, or Otmar Safnauer was twice, or Jos Capito was, an employee rather than an owner, would he still be at the team? Many believe Wolff inherited a successful F1 operation from Ross Brawn, his predecessor at the helm of Mercedes, who put down the building blocks of the squad's success, and 1996 F1 champion Damon Hill is one of those. Speaking on Sky Sports F1, Hill touched on Mercedes' situation. He said, "Toto has had a long honeymoon period, a fantastic period of success with the team that he moved into, which was pre-formed. Ross Brawn did a lot of the groundwork for that. It's hard now for him. The real work begins when you've got it wrong or when something isn't going right. That's quite tough to work out. That's his job. He's the boss. He's got to work out where it's going wrong and who's not telling him what's going wrong within the team," the Briton explained. To make things worse for Mercedes, Hamilton seems to have completely lost faith in the team, with whom he won 6 of his 7 F1 titles, as he'll be driving for Ferrari in 2025, and his replacement is yet to be announced. Hill commented, "I think he, meaning Hamilton, probably knew of Mercedes' struggles the moment the first new regulation car appeared, that Mercedes were all at sea. Hamilton has appeared dejected for a long time at the team, and after exiting qualifying in Q1 in China, he laughed in an interview when asked about what was going wrong with the car and what went wrong in the session. For him, December can't come quick enough, but for Wolff, he must begin to rebuild now. The car obviously needs improving, and that needs to start at the absolute base level, from the concept stage, something that realistically won't happen until the new regulations in 2026 now. But the rebuild of the driver lineup has to happen now, and at the moment, Toto's only plan seems to be to get Max Verstappen out of Red Bull. Wolff has always been a team principal who uses the media as a negotiation piece. If he puts out the image of how he wants things to be for long enough, eventually he might gaslight Formula One into doing what he wants. That is what is currently happening with his pursuit of Verstappen. In China, Wolff said, "There are so many factors that play a role for a driver joining. Clearly, when you look at it from the most rational point of view, you can say it is the quickest car in the hands of the quickest driver. But I don't think this is the only reason you stay where you are. For, let's say, simple minds, that might be the only reason to stay in the car. But maybe there's more depth to some people that consider other factors too, and I think Max has that depth. Call me simple, but leaving the fastest car on the grid behind for the 5th fastest doesn't seem like a good idea." Asked about Wolff's ongoing hints about Verstappen potentially being available, Horner told the media, "Have you spoken to Max about this? Because if you speak to Max, it's not about pieces of paper at the end of the day. We know that he has a contract to the end of 2028. It's about how he feels in the team, the relationship he has in the team, and the way he's performing. And I don't think Toto's problems are his drivers. I think he's probably got other elements that he needs to be focusing on, rather than focusing on drivers that are unavailable. Getting Verstappen into a Mercedes might help Mercedes. Who knows? Maybe the most successful driver in F1 history is washed up, and George Russell is actually terrible, and when Wolff gets Verstappen into his car, it will suddenly be a race winner. Seems unlikely, but crazier things have happened. However, Horner is probably right. Toto has got more important things to focus on than trying to tempt top drivers to a car that isn't competitive with the front of the field. For the last couple of seasons, the Mercedes team under Toto's leadership have not shown any sign that they know how to get out of their current slump, and the blame is starting to be placed at the team principal's feet. Can he continue to sweep it under the no-blame culture rug, or are more drastic measures required from Mercedes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.